Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Monday, May 11th, 2020. Couldn't think of that date for a second. This is another section in the Psalm 23 Devotional. Let's get into Psalm 23 together without further ado. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Once again, I talked on Friday, I believe, that this was a transition. We're in the middle, right in the middle, after verse 4 of this whole psalm. What we discover is that we've transitioned, and if you're unfamiliar, let me just catch you up real quick. The first four verses are carrying the shepherd imagery. The Lord is my shepherd. And if I'm being honest, sheep in the understanding of Scripture, they're not smart. They're rebellious. They wander off. They are hard to lead at times. And it's fascinating that David would say, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want." And when he starts talking about He makes me to lie down in green pastures, he's using language that is reserved in the Hebraic language for animals. And so what he's doing is he's equating himself with a sheep. And I want to offer that that's not condescending. That's not, that's not a way to diminish David. I think what David is trying to say is he's trying to explain the complexities of his own heart. And what I mean by that is the minute you say yes to Jesus, I wish it were so, you don't go 100% into, oh, now I'm a mature saint that has no places of wrestling in their heart. And I think David's trying to understand this, that this psalm isn't about, oh, I become a believer. It's not like this ladder where we have this linear progression into healthiness. What it is I think David is saying that every time I journey with the Lord, He exposes to me in his great way of walking me through the story of my life. He exposes to me where there's a place in my heart that is, for lack of a better term, it's dumb, and it gets afraid way too easy, and it goes and it tries to hide, and it's not all of me. There's this other part of my brain and this other part of my heart that is so sure of God's love, but there's this hidden quadrant, if you will, this hidden corner that goes and tries to run away. And it's in those places that David is saying, those are the places that the Lord will actually cause my circumstance to bring me to an awareness that He needs to be my shepherd. And so this place of the minute we believe that we have graduated, that our whole heart has graduated beyond being a sheep, I think is the minute that we've lost sight of the beautiful complexity of spiritual formation. So as we get into this second part, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I want you to see this. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And then he goes on to say, you anoint my head with oil. But we're going to stay in this part. And I want to draw two things out in particular. One, you prepare a table, and the word before me in the presence of my enemies. These are two different Hebrew words. And so when David is saying you, meaning God, when you prepare a table before me, that means in the face of. That means you are face to face. The Father, the Lord is a host of a feast, and we sit face to face with the Lord. But this in the presence, that second word presence, it doesn't mean this utopic, oh, like my enemies have become my friends. And most of us know that. The word presence means to be in contradiction with. And so it's almost as if you can look at David's own life. The people that were in opposition to David, right? The principalities that were in opposition to David, when David became king, these things had to sit at the table and honor what David was carrying and honor the authority David had. So let's unpackage this a little bit. So what David is communicating is that in these places where sometimes we're a sheep and the Lord is having to lead us as a shepherd, suddenly this imagery shifts and there's an intimacy that you don't get as a sheep because sheep don't sit at the table. What we discover is that the process of shepherding that the Lord is taking David through in all of the hidden places of his heart, it's trying to produce a measure of intimacy, of maturity, of awareness that David can sit at the table that the Lord has prepared in the presence of all of the things that have tormented, that have oppressed, that have been an enemy to, that have been pushing back on who David is and what God is doing. David now can sit in that place because there's a measure of intimacy where he is face to face with the Lord. Now, that's on a big scale. On a smaller scale, when we see this idea of you prepare a table before me, there's something specific that David's saying. And so I want to invite you into this, right? This is actually in Isaiah 65. This is the idea of the table, right? This is God's condemnation of the people. And he says, but you who forsake the Lord, who forget my holy mountain, who prepare a table for Gad. I want to pause there. That's not a Chicagoan saying God and saying Gad. That's a joke. Sorry. I'll go back and say it again. But you who forsake the Lord, who forget my holy mountain, who prepare a table for Gad, and who furnish a drink offering for many. What's he saying? He's saying that when you are preparing a table for these idols and these pagan realities, you're offering them something, right? And then we go a step further. This is actually in Psalm 78, when he says, yes, they spoke against God. They said, can God prepare a table in the wilderness? What were they really saying? Can God meet the needs that I have in the wilderness? And what do we understand here when David says, oh, you shepherd me? And then the shepherding ends, and what we realize is that you prepare a table. You sit me down, right? Because this is the reality, is God saying you are showing honor and respect to these foreign gods and these idols. What is David saying God does to us? He sits us down, shows us the respect that he has for us. He positions us fully in a place where we have all of our needs met. We are victorious over any enemy that has oppressed us. And sometimes, if I'm being honest, I want to race ahead and just get to the point where he set the table before me in the presence of my enemies, where I'm already victorious and I barely broke a sweat. But the reality is that there's a fair amount of shepherding that has to take place, where my heart has to become aware of the faithfulness and the comfort of the Lord. And it's only then will that sheep part of my heart come and actually sit at the table in the presence of my enemy, fully convinced that whatever is speaking against the work of God, the Lord has already fully equipped me to have victory. So I offer this morning, and I challenge us and I encourage us, where is the Lord inviting you? And this is the thing, it's probably in the places where there's the most amount of fear, there's the most amount of insecurity, there's the most amount of, I want to run and hide, I don't want to deal with that. Where is the Lord prepared the table for you before his face, and that you can sit there in the presence of your enemies and not be touched? We bless you today.